Even seasoned real estate professionals can miss these massive red flags when looking to purchase rental properties. As an attorney, I have seen firsthand when these unknown issues occur, and let me tell you, it can absolutely destroy what you're trying to build. Hi, I'm Randall. The featherless bird on my shoulder is Suki, and welcome back to 30-Day Investor. Now, generally on this channel, I focus on documenting my 5-stock quantitative investment process. However, today, I'm going to give you what I call the real estate reality check. It's 3 local government issues that can completely destroy your value in rental property, and 2 non-negotiable things that you need to do to ensure you don't run into these problems. Now, the first trap is what I call the compounding lien trap. So if you think about it, when a potential investor looks at a piece of property, they look at costs like mortgages, property taxes, homeowners insurance, and the like, and they compare that to the potential rental income that they're going to receive. However, it's almost always the case that they never consider the impact of a lien or a fine that is running against a piece of property for things like unpermitted fencing or overgrown lots. This issue is compounded if the property owner either intentionally or inadvertently ignores the notice of violation from the local government explaining the issue and how long they have to correct it. Now, eventually, these fines are turned into liens, and that does 2 things. First, it completely freezes the equity that you have in the property. You can't sell it. You can't use it to finance another property. The second thing it does is after a certain amount of time, most local governments then have the ability to come in and foreclose on that property, completely removing or destroying your equity. Now, trap number 2 is what I call the unpermitted addition trap. And how this works is a previous owner does some work that is unpermitted. You, as a real estate investor, come in, you like the fact that there's some bonus square footage, and you decide not to look into whether or not that bonus square footage was created correctly. Now, assuming for a moment that the previous property owner didn't get the permits or the correct inspections, this now becomes your legal liability if you purchase the property. I have personally seen individuals have to come in and pull after the fact permitting, requiring tens of thousands of dollars in engineering and potentially removing upgrades in order to bring the structure into compliance with the county's permitting requirements. Now, the third trap is what I call the zoning violation trap, and this one is really bad. Now, if you're like me, I'm sure you've heard individuals talking about converting properties into Airbnbs or into venues for weddings and receptions and such. What a lot of people don't think about is that zoning ordinances are there for a reason. If you buy a piece of residential property and attempt to run it as a commercial business, a local government can fine you. They can get a cease and desist order to stop you. And if they need to, they can even go to a court and get some injunctive relief to keep you from doing what you're doing. If that happens, the value you have in your property disappears overnight, but the costs associated with it do not. Now that we've talked about the 3 issues, let's talk about 2 things that I've found in my experience that can help significantly diminish or completely eliminate these issues. The first solution is what I call the pre-purchase government audit. Now, most people who are interested in purchasing rental property understand that a title search is very important. However, what a lot of people don't understand is that a title search only catches what is in public record. Anything that hasn't been recorded yet is not part of a title search. This is really important because a lot of local government related issues have a delay between the time that they are initiated and the time that they are recorded. So things like unrecorded code enforcement cases or unresolved building permit issues don't end up in public record, and therefore you are not made aware of them when a title search is done. before you purchase a piece of property, you need to proactively request any records related to open code enforcement cases, unresolved building permit issues, and incompliant zoning issues so that you can review that information and be aware of those issues ahead of time. Now, a lot of people will say, well, that's what the seller disclosures are for. Well, that's kind of true. But the fact is that either intentionally or inadvertently, some sellers don't put that information in there. And in the end, it's your responsibility once you own the property. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some legal things that you can do to try to address that with the seller. But again, while you own the property, you're responsible for the mortgage, you're responsible for compliance, you're responsible for all these issues. The second solution that I'll tell you about is what I call the first response solution. And basically, that's a situation where you have received a notice of violation or you've been made aware of a notice of violation issue either by the pre-purchase audit that you did or, amazingly enough, by a potential seller. And you need to make sure the first thing you do in these cases is to reach out to code enforcement proactively. And this is because choosing to ignore it almost always results in higher fines and less time to comply. In my experience, if you reach out to a code enforcement investigator, have a conversation with them, they are normally going to be willing to give you time to comply. And once the property is in compliance, they're going to be more willing to help you reduce the fines through whatever processes are available. One last thing to think about. Remember, rental real estate is a business, and that business is at least partially governed by the rules, regulations, and laws of the local government. As a result, if you don't know what those local rules, regulations, and laws are, then you are, for all intents and purposes, flying blind. With all that said, I prefer to not have to argue with magistrates, to not have to fix leaky roofs, to not have to deal with the issues that come with residential rental real estate. If you're interested in something like that, I do monthly updates on my 5-stock quantitative process, good or bad. And if you'd like more information about that, do me a favor, like this video, subscribe to this channel, because the next update is coming out in just a couple days. Regardless of whether you tune back in or I never see you again, remember, the most important rule is to ensure that whatever you do is done with no emotion, just execution. And I will see you in a couple days.